Hello, hello. Welcome to the Global Citizen Therapy Podcast, the podcast for women of color who are daughters of immigrants to feel seen, heard, and validated. My name is Nancy Diaz, and I am a trauma-informed therapist, speaker, and your podcast host today. And now, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, welcome back to the Global Citizen Therapy Podcast. I'm super excited today because I have a very special guest and she's going to be telling us all about herself. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and introduce her. So, Carol Umanzor has a business and it's called Born to Be Seen. And it's amazing because it centers around the idea that we are all born to be seen and celebrated as we are. And so, through an emotional wellness practice of self celebration, love, and compassion, we can shine in the ways that we are intended to. Carol has spent 15 years in education. She holds a master's of art in teaching and a master's of science in cell molecular biology. She was a science teacher for several years, and it was this experience that shaped Carol's desire to share her journey in emotional wellness with others. And in her business, Carol centers on a humanizing approach that is intersectional, responsive, and inclusive. So thank you, Carol. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Nancy. Excited to be here. Excited for our talk.
Yeah, of course. And we connected, and I was looking for podcast guests that wanted to share their journey a little bit about, financial empowerment and what they're doing in their businesses to help women, especially women of color, around money mindset and just around money in general, because it's something that we don't talk about enough. So, do you want to start maybe a little bit, if we take it back, share a bit about your own journey with money and where you're at now and how you're helping people in your business around that?
Yeah. So definitely. Let me see. Let me think back. Where does it start? Well, I think it really kind of starts in my background, in my upbringing. My family is from El Salvador, and they came here during the war. Here is the U.S. in California. I'm in the Bay Area, and they fled like chaos and turmoil and just really hard economic times, and they were living that immigrant life. I watched my mom, my dad just kind of do everything and anything all the time. And definitely grew up seeing our parents just working to exhaustion, my sister and I. And so a lot of times it's like, well, I want to be able to help. Like, I want to be able to, contribute so that my mom and dad aren't working so much all the time. And I think that's really kind of where it started, and like this desire of how I'm gonna contribute, not just for my family, but for myself. Because along with that, because of kind of the trauma that my family experienced in El Salvador, my sister and I were raised kind of differently than maybe a lot of like other Latina young women, girls were raised, where there can be this pressure to get married and have kids. But because both my parents had their own experience, their message to my sister and I was like, you need to take care of yourselves. We would be fighting, and they tell us, stop fighting because you're just gonna have each other, when we die. And so that's kind of really where it started. I think just this idea that I needed to be able to take care of myself somehow. Even though I came from a big family, the idea was that I was gonna need to be like self-sufficient. And
Makes such a difference, doesn't it? I think, and we were chatting about this before the episode about how it makes such a difference, I think, when you have parents who recognize that, because you're right. Like, often in our culture, there is this pressure to just get married, find someone who earns a decent amount and marry that person and just be taken care of, right? And it's interesting, I don't know how it was in your journey, but at least in mine, like my mom did that, right? She married and then she was a stay-at-home mom. But it was still interesting that both my parents were still always telling me, go get that university education, go get a good paying job, and later on you can get married and have kids, but we want you to be self-sufficient and not have to rely on a man for or anything for anything really, but for money. And then keeping on with that message of you have to keep going, ponte las pilas, just keep working harder and harder. And that's I think really important and really empowering.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it has a lot to do with just how both my parents were raised too. Because, even my last name, like my last name is a matrilineal lineage. Like it comes from my grandma and my great grandma. So even though it's kind of like sad on one point that my dad couldn't rely like on his father, his grandfather to really kind of take care of him, that's what he saw. Like he just saw women take care of him. So it was like, that was, I guess, kind of what was in his mind. Like even though my dad was always very present in my life growing up and even now, the message that he wanted to communicate to my sister and I was like, it doesn't matter. Like he never really cared about us dating. I mean, he did, like in a overprotective father way, but not in a like this is
Right.
who you need to marry. It was kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
stay away from
Mhm.
from boys kind of thing. But yeah, no, definitely. And I did grow up seeing my mom. My mom is very ambitious. She is a risk taker. And there is no way in this world, I think, that she would, because my dad really wanted kind of like a traditional, I think, more household where like the mom stays, but my mom was just like, she just wasn't going to do it. She's that type of person that just can't stay indoors. She just needed to be able to be doing something. And she just found her way to different resources. Like she became a certified nurse assistant, with very little education, even from El Salvador, coming over here. And so I just watched my mom figure things out. And like she got into buying property even like here in the Bay Area while she was still undocumented. And so that was kind of like the model that we had. It was like that was the expectation. I think at times my mom would make more than my dad had, and we were just like that wasn't like a thing that my sister and I ever even thought about, of with partners, like, oh, I need to know how much money you make or anything. It was like, well, I'm going to be taking care of myself, so I hope you can take care of yourself, that was like kind of
Yeah.
like more
Yeah.
of like a half and half sort of thing, because that's what we saw, and that's kind of what was like reinforced, which I think was great, because like my mom gave me a bank account when I was like 12. I had a little booklet, you know I probably spent all the money at 12 she gave to me, because I still have that bank account, but it was for when I was 13. And they'll tell me, thank you so much for being a Bank of America customer since 1990. So yeah, like it was just kind of this expectation. I just thought everybody did that. It wasn't really it didn't seem out of the ordinary, to have my own money and to like be saving, and that I get to control this money, and this is how you manage your money. And my mom would always have like pockets of money, like literal physical pockets of money, like in our house. If she was at work and I called her at work and I was like, I need $5 for, I don't know, candy or whatever. And she'd be like, okay, in this book on the bookshelf on page 121, you'll find $5 bills. You can grab them from there. Or in my jacket that's hanging in the closet, there's a $5 bill there. But she also had like actual like investments, and like she just put her money in different kind of pots, and so it definitely taught me to kind of really think about money in different ways, and think about not just how to store it, but how I can make it kind of work for me. And that was like one aspect, which I think was good, because it did teach like my sister and I think, how to really go for things. Like we were super overachievers. Like both of our sisters, both myself and my sister went to graduate school. Like we kind of like overdid everything, but that's kind of what we were taught, and I think the piece that kind of got me to where I am today was that piece, which is like what my parents knew, especially during that time. of like kind of work was that like, led to exhaustion and burnout. And especially I think in the US, like there's this culture of like, being like a workaholic is not a bad thing. And it
Mhm.
really is not that great. And so I think that that's really where I wanted to pivot, because it was like I didn't want to live that life anymore where I felt like I just needed to work all the time and just feel anxious. And it was just a lot. And that came when I left teaching, because teaching is a very demanding job that literally never ends. And I was definitely living that lifestyle. But yeah, I was just like really drained. And I was going every day teaching students how to do what I did, go to school, go to college, go to graduate school, get a job. And I was like, wow, and I'm not even really happy here. Like I'm teaching you to do something that isn't even working for me. And so
I think sometimes we get older, we mature, and then we reflect and we realize, wow, I did all of this because this was just the path that was laid out for me. But then we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to teach the next generation this, because I have three younger sisters. And, in the beginning, I was just like, yeah, you have to go to college. If you need help with applications or with whatever, like I'll help you. But now I'm just kind of like, I'm seeing, even my 13-year-old sister already burned out and already like, I can't come visit you in Australia because I have this test to study for and whatever. And I'm like, I I want to fly you here so that you can learn from travel and from other avenues, because I've seen now like there's other pathways and there's so many different things and options that we have, especially, you know, we do have a lot of different privileges that our immigrant parents didn't have. Even,
right.
having that US passport. I also grew up with undocumented parents. And so, they didn't have that opportunity to come and live in another country or study abroad or any of that. So, I'm trying to show that to my little sister, like, hey, there's all these other opportunities, and she's like, oh, I kind of want to be a teacher, but they don't make a lot of money. I'm like, in the US, they don't make a lot of money, but in other countries, they do, and there's all these other options. And I said, you could teach online, start your own business. Like there's other options. She said, well, I want to be a teacher, but I want to be a millionaire. I said, well, you can. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that you can't just because teachers don't become millionaires in the US. You
Yeah.
can definitely do that. You can start your own business teaching. And and now I'm meeting people who are doing that. One of my clients is teaching and she's making great money. And it's just amazing to see that. And it sounds like what you decided to do. You quit teaching
Mhm.
and now it sounds like you're feeling more fulfilled. You're actually getting to help people and it's feeling more aligned with your values. Tell us a bit about your business.
Yeah. So I'm feeling less um exhausted. It's just like an
Good.
interesting, I think like teaching really works for some people too, because like some people just have that level of energy to interact with 100+ people a day, because I was middle school and high school, so it's like a lot. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have that kind of energy. I never have, but I do like working with people. And I think that that's kind of what sort of led me to figure out like, well, what am I going to do next? Because that was the other thing. It was like, well, I can't leave teaching. Like, this is all I know how to do. I can't leave the classroom. Like, sort of like that closed mindset of, how am I going to get to my next step, or how am I, if I'm not making any money, And so,
Right.
um, really like that next step for me was just relying on my skill set. Like I have a very strong skill set. I have a very varied skill set because of teaching and all the other things that I've done. And like literally, I decided in fall 2019 that I was going to leave the classroom. And before anybody knew about COVID. And I had told my principal already, because you're supposed to tell them ahead of time in January. And then COVID hit. But I was still like, I'm not going back. I'm like, this is it. Like, this is my last year. And pretty much it was hard to get a job because everybody's getting laid off. Like there's all these things happening, all these shifts. But I was still determined to figure something
Mm-hmm.
out. And what I ended up doing was just networking, getting to know people. Like I ended up getting like a contractor job, like an instructional design contractor position, like literally like a week after I stopped teaching.
Nice.
And yeah, and it
Meant to
paid me.
be.
And this was another thing that was like, I think connected to like money mindset was this this was a British company. And so they were paying me in pounds. And so they were paying me more for less time. And that was like a whole other like set of emotions that I needed to deal with that I was not expecting.
Yeah.
I just felt so guilty. I was like, wow, I don't have to do anything right now, because I'm done.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think like throughout that journey, like really making space and figuring out where to go and what I need for my emotions as they came up is really what I think led me on this path to start creating this business and like building it up, because that was one thing that also in my childhood, I wasn't able to get so much because it was like, crisis mode for my parents. Like my childhood was like they had just escaped war, and so their priorities were making sure I had food and shelter and all that. And so like the emotional part was not really like there's not too much room for it. And so I always would just kind of hold things in, or I didn't know how to
Mhm.
like process them, and I didn't know what I needed. I thought I was just doing too much, or I thought that I don't know, that I was too sensitive, or all these things that I just kind of heard as a child. But when
Well, it
I
makes sense, doesn't it? That we have more anxiety and depression. Like now the studies are showing that children of immigrants have more anxiety and depression than their immigrant parents. And it makes sense because exactly what you're saying. Like we see like they've just come from this trauma. And so we have to hold space for them. There's no space for our own emotions. And so then, yeah, we follow this path and we just think, okay, this is exactly what we need to do. And then when we start to thrive, we feel guilty. And it's just this cycle that keeps repeating itself. But I think, yeah, well, this is why we're so anxious and stressed all the time, is because we put so much pressure on ourselves to always be, caretakers for our parents
right,
and always be honoring those sacrifices, that we don't allow ourselves that self-compassion and that space to, we don't know how to take up space. We don't
right.
know how to express our emotions. So I love that you are doing this in your business, because I'm like, this is exactly what we need more of.
Yeah, and I think like that was the other big thing is I wanted a way to kind of center myself, like I feel like there's a lot of skills and there's a lot of like resources that I've learned through like community, through going to therapy myself, that I want to be able to share and like put out there and make accessible to folks who maybe might not even realize that they might be suppressing some of these things. But yeah, like I think that because you don't really get an opportunity when you're in a situation like that to have your emotions or even center yourself, I think really kind of reclaiming that can be super empowering and can really help maneuver just kind of day-to-day things, from these emotions you don't expect to get from getting a job that pays you more and you have to do less, or like, or transitioning into something else where it feels scary or whatever it is. Like I think that
Mhm.
um having that skill set has been like super helpful for me, um and that's why and that's kind of like what brought me to want to create like this business. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And so what has your own healing journey been like? What does that look like? You mentioned therapy, and I know a lot of my clients and people that I get messages and emails from, it's their first time reaching out for help, because like we have been talking about, daughters of immigrants, we're just taught, and especially if we're the eldest daughters, we're just taught to just hold everything in and make sure that we're taking care of everyone else
Yeah.
before we take care of ourselves. And so actually reaching out for help, especially when we have had to do everything and learn everything on our own, can be really scary. And I know that at least in my experience, like it was not that easy reaching out for help. And when I did, and the second therapist that I got was not very good, and I stopped going. I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back. So I'm curious if you don't mind sharing about your journey, therapy and otherwise, like how has that been going for you?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I want to say the first time I started going to therapy was maybe say, how old am I now? Oh, like 14 years ago. And I was 24, like 23, 24. And I was just finding myself having like these I just had a lot of trauma from my childhood. And I would have like these flashbacks that even then, when all that was happening as a child, my parents kind of go to, which I think is what they did for themselves. So like, I don't even see it as them trying to shut me down, but it would be like, it happened already, it's over. Like that was their sort of
Mm-hmm.
mentality. And I can see that's how they would manage, that's how they
Mm-hmm.
managed kind of to be able to take care of my sister and I. And that's what I would tell myself. So anytime I would have like a flashback or something, be like, it's over. I'm not there anymore. And that didn't stop anything. Like it would still
Yep.
come back. And so I think I was super lucky to be around very loving community that kind of pointed me in the right direction of resources. And I had like a really good friend at that time who was volunteering at like a place that was centered on women of color. And it was like a nonprofit. So it was kind of like a 10 session thing, but it was just so powerful for like the first time to have someone just kind of listen and validate, and be like, that
Right.
totally makes sense when I feel that way. Or, it
Mm-hmm.
was just like, yeah, that was super transformative. And I like finished those 10 sessions because I always really liked therapy. Like I always like talking about myself. And I'm actually the baby. Like I grew up as the baby, and I feel like there wasn't enough time for me ever. So it was like I never felt like I really got someone's like undivided attention like that for that long, who just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
hear everything about, like to support me. And so that was super powerful. After I ended like that kind of nonprofit 10 session thing, I did go to like a drop, and I also had like a bad experience, and that also turned me off to
Right.
therapy.
Happens.
Yeah. And like I think like I just didn't really know myself, and it's so vulnerable too. And I think like that's the difficult thing,
Really
that
is.
when
Mhm.
you're looking for a therapist, I think it's kind of how my parents think of teachers. Like sometimes, in El Salvador, they're like revered and you do everything the teacher said, and that's what the teacher said, and like everything's right. But like here, we have some rundown schools, some burnt out teachers. I was a burnt out teacher, and you have to actually go and figure out what's going on with your kid. But and
Mhm.
so I think I thought of like therapy that way, like, oh well, they have a degree and they like know, like I can trust them
Mhm.
because they're by law supposed to hold on to my secrets.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
and
No,
um and I just,
there's
yeah, I
some
think,
problems.
right, yeah. And I think at that time I just didn't really know what I needed, in terms of like just mental health and like my emotional wellness. Like I just didn't know, so I would just go and be like, somebody tell me, what I need. And
Yeah. Yeah. It's
um
hard to put yourself out there. Yeah. Especially when you don't know what you don't know. It's a process. Like
yeah,
now, I think we know so much more, but we're like way further in our journeys than when we started. And so, yeah, I think that first step of reaching out and asking for help, that's the scariest. And I always tell people, like, it's always the first few sessions that, it's hard to
yeah,
get over that hump because, yeah, you're putting yourself out there, you're being super vulnerable. And, it could go one of two ways, depending on the type of therapist that you have, and depending, I think, even if it's a good fit or not, because some of them might not be even problematic or unethical, but it just might
mhm,
not be a good fit. And so
right,
you might be feeling a certain type of way and just wanting to take a step back. And so, yeah, I just want to say, like, if you are feeling that you need to take a step back and you need to find a new therapist, I always want to empower people to just say that
mhm,
and just
yeah,
communicate and say, oh, this isn't working for me and I'm going to look for someone else. Like
yeah.
a good therapist is never going to take offense to that. It's
It's
just
like
not a good
dating.
fit. Yeah, it's like dating. It's fine.
First date didn't work out. I was feeling the
No, it's fine. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly like
And
dating.
right, like with that, there was, I ended up seeing them for a year, and it was like towards the end that I was kind of like, it didn't really end well. And
Right.
or it ended abruptly because of just like a negative interaction. And I was able to express that to her because my go-to at that time, I think at that time I was like 27, was to just disappear and just be like, well, I'm just not going to
Yeah.
make another appointment. But she like chased me down. And she's like, can we
Yeah.
have a closing session? And then like I was able to kind of express the things that didn't resonate with me.
Hmm.
Which was, fine. And I want to say like I took a couple years, like I just didn't go, and I was still kind of just seeing the same sort of patterns and cycles. Like, okay, I need some help. I'm that
Hmm.
person. Like, I feel like I'm that person
Hmm.
will be
Hmm.
like, no, I need to fix this. Like, what do I need to Google? What book do I need to read? And
What's the solution? Yep, yep.
like this just
We're,
can't keep
we're
happening.
so solution focused, I think. We just like want to check something off. We just want the quick fix.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I did end up going to I it was like a drop, no, it was like a kind of sliding scales a clinic a couple years after that was focused on women. And then I was lucky enough to get matched with a woman of color, and she was just phenomenal. I just love her. I love her forever. And I saw her for several years. And I feel like she had to like push me to be like, I think you're done. Like, are you met your goals for now? Do you have any other goals? And I was like, okay, can we just
Right.
do forever? Like, I just love you. But yeah, that was very transformative for me, and it was like a really good experience. And I think especially because I think just her being a woman of color, she also used her lived experience to kind of create that experience for me in the
Mhm.
sessions, and that made
Yeah.
me feel more at ease. It made me feel comfortable. It just did a lot for me. And I think she just
Hmm.
kind of knew that like the structural systemic kind of issues in the US and how that impact women of color mental health and just kind of day-to-day kind of
It's
trauma.
so
Like, yeah, that was like
important.
super transformative for me. And yeah, I just like really really appreciated my time with her. I did get to do like some peer counseling programs and stuff like that, and that was also like another piece that really helped me, because I feel like even with my therapist, even at that time, I was very like, nobody look at me, you can't see my feelings. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being in like a collective sort of experience where I'm sharing how I'm doing and people are really holding space for you is just like a whole nother that just took me to a whole nother level, because it helped me validate like my own feelings. Like, no, you don't have to hide. No, it doesn't have to be a secret. Like you get to have your
Yeah.
feelings and they're valid, they're important. And that definitely just shifted the way that I even moved around the world, I think, because um kind of growing up, I think, with parents that were undocumented, my family, extended family, like my parents likely were able to get like residency pretty early on because of this Ronald Reagan amnesty thing for folks from El Salvador. But my family that came in after, they had missed that, and we both. So I was always around, like, you can't, don't say too much,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
this,
Hmm.
and so I
Hmm.
kind of grew up like feeling like I have to hold everything really close. I can't let people
Right.
know what I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what I know, what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And
All the secrets. Don't
yeah,
burst into tears if you get pulled over,
yeah,
There's all this trauma.
no, like
Yeah.
seriously, yeah. So I think that having this experience shifted that for me, where it's like, no, you actually don't have to do that anymore. Like you had to do
Mhm.
that when you're a child for whatever reasons, and now it's over. And now you get to tell people, how you feel. And it changed my expectation how people should receive me, because I used to feel like, oh, my parents have so much stuff going on, I don't want to tell them that this hurt my feelings or that this is bothering me.
Mm.
That's like
Yeah.
another thing. And
Hmm.
going through that experience helped shift that for me, where it was like more like, no, people need to know if they want to be in my life, how I feel. And
Yeah.
they want to know, like they want to be
Yes.
supportive and loving in my life, even if
Yeah.
it's the Sephora counter lady. So even like I had this one moment where I think something was wrong with something that I bought. And in the past, I would have just been like, oh, it's my fault. Like I looked at I would have like internalized it, like definitely an internalizer. But I got to my car, I saw that it was wrong, and I was like, no, I need to go back and tell them. And I like go to the counter and I tell the woman, like, this is like the wrong thing. It's not supposed to be in here. And expecting, like my expectation was that she was going to be like, wow, I'm so sorry, that's confusing, let's fix it. But this one day, the woman's response was like, well, what do you want me to do about it? And in my head I was like, not that, like that's not it, where in the past
Got
I would
it.
have been like, oh my god, it's totally my fault, but that made me feel like, no, that's not
Yeah.
it. I'm gonna
Yeah.
need some help here, like let me help you help me, but this was
Yeah.
not, that's not it. So I think like just that's just like a low example, but just in all aspects
No,
of,
I get it. It's uncomfortable to like take up space, to start advocating for yourself, all of these things when you never have ever in your life. And it just, yeah, and sometimes it's not even modeled for us to do that. And so it can be really hard to show up and and express your emotions and advocate for yourself and all these things. And especially when you have been feeling like, oh, I've been unsafe for so many years in my childhood and
Mhm.
adolescence and all of these things, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, it's safe. And actually people do care, and then you start to realize, oh, it's all right to talk to people. It's all right to
Yeah,
open up, to be vulnerable. And
yeah,
it's all right to have these, expectations and to set the bar higher for the people in your life, and just, yeah, it's great. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I think that helps shift like my expectation of others, because I think also kind of growing up this way, there is like this fear of like, oh, this might happen or something negative might happen because of, I grew up in California and it was the English only, it was very anti-immigrant during that time. So it's like all these things you kind of have to like hide about yourself, or these assumptions that kind of get built in. And I felt like when I was able to shift, like actually people do care. Because either way, I tell myself, like if I'm telling myself something in my head, whatever it is, I don't know if it's true or not, might as well just tell
Mm-hmm,
myself something pleasant, because if it's not
mm-hmm,
true, it's still pleasant, and
mm-hmm.
I can address it when it's in front of me instead of just worrying about the worst. Um, so yeah, I think that's really helped. And then like going back to my money mindset, like when I'm looking for like my I had like a job come up after that I'm also still doing for a university, and um the pay, like thinking about like the pay, where sometimes in my old mindset, I would think like, well, I have to fight for, what I need. And like, let me kind of make the argument of why I deserve this. And shifting to this perspective, I was like, well, people want to give me what I want. And so what do you do when people want to give you what you want? You tell them. And so I think that also just shifts the energy of how I kind of show up. And it's like, I can
Wow.
assert myself in a way that resonates and feels in alignment with me, and I can just, I don't have to huff and puff and use up all this energy to just take up space. Like I can just be my little flowy self and be like, well,
Yeah.
people want me here. So let me just tell you what I need. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. Wow, that's a gem right there. I think that is something that I'm going to take away from this episode, and I think a lot of listeners are going to take that away. Like, yeah, people want to give me what I want. That's amazing. That's the mindset shift that I didn't know I needed. So thank you.
Yes, you
No,
got
I love that. It's like when my coach told me, like, women of color, they want to invest. Not every woman of color is broke. Just because like we grew up broke doesn't mean that everyone else is broke and not
yeah,
wanting to invest in themselves. And I'm like,
right,
whoa, whoa,
right.
that is,
Yeah. Yeah, which
yeah,
is like another thing that I think is important for me whenever I'm looking for like someone's services, whether it's like a photo shoot or whatever. Like I want to pay them, like I don't go
yeah.
to them to be like, what's your discount price? It's like, no, tell me your price. That's what I'm gonna pay. I'm not gonna
Hmm.
try and
Yeah,
negotiate or anything. Like you deserve it. And
right. We want to support each other. Yeah,
right. And I think that that's also part of this new sort of money mindset that I've been trying to develop of like, okay, well, everything's in flow. So if I want things to flow in, they also need to flow out, And so let me just make sure that happens and do it like happily,
right.
not like,
Give back. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not so
Make
tight with the
room.
money. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just happy to help others. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, yeah, I think the more that I, yeah, approach it in that way and, look for other women of color to support when I'm hiring someone or that kind of thing, and just come at it from like a place of, yes, I want to support you. Like, let me know. And yeah, no, I'm not going to ask for a discount. Like, I am proud of you that you're raising your rates, and like, and that's one thing that, oh my God, so scary when I first raised my fees. But
Mhm.
my clients were like, yes, love that. So proud of you, like so happy for you. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, really?
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, I think we just love to support one another, and that's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad that you grew up that way as well, and I think I did too, where we're just like, I only have younger sisters or three younger sisters. And yeah, it was very much like, yeah, just support each other, don't fight with each other, just be nice to one another. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's no competition, there's no need for that competition. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Well, quickly tell us a little bit more about your business because we've been having so many great conversations, but I know that our listeners probably want to
Yeah.
find out more about what it's all about.
Yeah. So I'm like just getting started with it. Pretty much so far I've put on like a workshop on humanizing communication through emotional wellness. And this year I want to definitely share a little bit more like it with through workshops and things like that. I kind of want to see how it goes, maybe do courses, maybe like some coaching. My whole thing is like, okay, I don't want to burn out. So let me like do
Right.
little step by
Yeah.
step, like what
Just
feels good.
mindful approach. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And like a podcast too, because I definitely won't have like so much that I want to share about like emotional
Yes.
wellness
Mhm.
and most of the stuff that I do is like on my IG right now. I'll do like some lives with some folks who are doing other great stuff and just having really great conversations. Like just recently I did one on all the layoffs that are happening in tech out here and like burnout and sort of like what sort of things we can do and how emotional wellness can support us and things like that. And so yeah, I think the biggest sort of thing that for me sticks out that I think might be like some food for thought for folks listening is thinking when you're thinking about your own emotional wellness practices, like what are your needs? Everybody has like different types of needs in terms of what really helps them feel held or seen and really helps process that emotion or kind of move it through your body because I think we all have some and not all of them serve us well. Because I know for me, definitely
Mhm.
before I went to therapy, before I started doing all that, food was like how I coped. And I would just have a bunch of
Mhm.
chocolate, a bunch of sugar, a bunch of sweets, like fatty things. And that did not work out for me. I had to have my gallbladder removed.
Right.
And, I was forced to change my diet. And luckily, therapy and all that like really shifted the cravings I would have too, because it would feel like
Yes.
I wouldn't crave it as much when I had a different strategy to deal with whatever emotion. So I think like when we're thinking about like our emotional wellness practices, like really getting to know our bodies and getting to know
It's all
those,
connected.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then knowing like, well, what is it that you really need? Some people might need a hug, you might need to push a
Hmm.
wall, you might need to walk in nature,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Um,
Yeah. No,
like
I'm all about that as well. Listening to your body. And I think that that's so important, but it's also something that's so hard for us as daughters of immigrants because no one has ever really told us, like, hey, you can listen to your body, you can listen to your needs, or they've never asked us, what do you need? What do you want? What feels good for you right now? And so
yeah,
this is like new to us. We're just like trying to
right,
figure it out. And
yeah,
especially, with this, yeah, hustle culture, we are trained, and told that we should ignore all those needs. If our body's telling us to rest, to slow down, whatever, but no, our employer tells us, no, keep going, keep going, keep going, and
yeah,
keep producing, then yeah, it's just more messaging of, no, don't worry about your needs. You don't have any needs. Like you're here to
yeah,
support our needs and make us a profit, and
yeah. Yeah, and I think
it's
like
simple to ask that question.
yeah, and I think like unfortunately that training gets started in schooling because I just remember being a teacher and just seeing how much busy work. It's like, wow, we have all this time. We really don't need all this time to do this, but we don't really have space to be like, let's go outside, let's go on a walk. Like I can't really take you outside of this room. And
Mhm.
I think that, I think we're seeing that when people are arrested, you actually are more productive and you can create
Yes.
better work than just like go, go, go on this kind of
Mhm.
40-hour wheel. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely true. It's definitely been a challenge to just feel, like what's in our bodies. And, which as you're talking was making me think like, oh, I'm so like proud of my sister and my niece, because my sister's really good at asking my niece like, are you hungry? Is your belly full? How does your belly feel? Like just like little things like that. She's 2 years old.
Yeah.
And she's
Yeah.
just so good at, my little niece, she has a fierce no. She's like, she's really good at boundaries right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
yeah,
love that.
so I'm happy to see that like happening at least like one generation. But yeah, like I feel like
Sure.
we're still learning. And
Yeah.
and I think like the other piece is like who's your tribe, like who are your people, because I think we can have like a whole set of community, but when it comes to emotional wellness, like who's your little emotional wellness tribe, like who's going to give you what you need and you can do that for
Who's
them.
going to meet the emotional needs?
Yeah,
Yes,
because I think it's
exactly.
so for me it's been super powerful to have like a group of people,
Yes.
I think
Community.
sometimes it's like that. I think tradition or historically gets put on like your partner, whoever your partner is, like they should be able to meet
Mhm.
like these meets. But that has not worked for me. And
No, I think we're all realizing, the older we get, the more
yeah,
mature we get, like, oh, wow, like these needs could be met by other people. There's no
yeah,
need to, rely on this one person because actually
yeah,
that's a huge burden on that one person
right,
anyway. And
yeah,
it's
and
going to
like
lead to resentment and all these things. So I think more and more people are realizing, like, oh, wow, I can have, soulmates in friends as well. And
yeah,
they can meet different needs. And
oh yeah,
and we're experimenting and we're learning these things, but it's all a process. But I
yeah.
love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I always tell my friends that like they're my little tribe. I always tell them we're a match made in heaven. We're together. But
Yeah, you're my
yeah,
other half. Yeah,
yeah. We're just yeah,
be cute
but
with each other. Love that.
yeah, and I think, I feel like friends come with different skill sets and you can go to them for different
Yeah.
things, but
Mhm.
I know what like for me what really resonates when I'm having an emotion, like I don't want anybody's advice. I just need you to be with me with my emotion.
Yeah.
Like I just need
Mhm.
you to listen to me if I'm angry. I might be yelling,
Yeah.
but not at you, or
Mhm. Yeah.
crying or whatever it is. But just like having someone reflect that back at you, like, wow, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You have that.
Yeah.
I think that that's just so powerful. And I know for some folks, advice really does help, or like that helps move
Yeah.
it for them, or, maybe it is a hug or whatever it is. But like, I
But
think,
expressing your needs, I think that's the important thing because it's like what you said, like I know what I want and people want to give me what I want. So same thing. Like if you tell your friend, like, hey, I have this problem and right now what I'm looking for is just to vent, or just for you to hold space or however you want to word it. But, or you say very clearly, like, I'm not looking for advice. And
yeah,
then they know, and that expectation is there because, yeah, so many times, like, we want to help our friends when they're
yeah.
hurting and we want to give advice. And yeah, so it can be hard to kind of not do that.
Yeah, I think especially Western culture is like find the solution or
Find
like
the solution.
minimize the pain and whatever
Yeah.
needs to
Yeah.
happen to do that. And sometimes I feel like we need just help moving through the pain instead of like trying
Yeah.
to numb it out or cut it off, but just help
Mhm.
experiencing our emotion, and then you grow from that so much more, and it helps us like move in different directions
Yeah.
and places
Yeah.
and experiences.
Yeah, and I think it's important to find friends who are on that same page as you are, and not just trying to numb it or distract you for a minute or, who are, yeah, because it's uncomfortable for all of us, in the beginning to sit with our emotions and then to sit with the emotions of another person. It's like, whoa, this is kind of a lot. So finding that person that can actually meet those needs instead of just, distracting you and saying, oh, let's take some shots and let's just forget this whole thing ever happened because
Right.
yeah, that's not going to help you so much in the long run.
Mhm.
But, for so many of us, that's like all we know. That's what we grew up
Yeah.
seeing. And so that's what we know to do. And that's how we cope, and I'm glad that you mentioned food as well, because I do see that in a lot of my clients as well, that yeah, we just go for the junk food and then we just start stuffing our faces, and usually we're not hungry, we're full, we're way past full, and we start to notice, like our gut health is not so good, and then we're having all these issues. So I love that you mentioned, that therapy can be really helpful with that, because yes, I think that, yeah, my clients always like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. Like I listened to my body and I didn't eat any of that junk food. And, I'm learning other coping skills from therapy. And I'm like, yes, I love that, because there is such a connection, it's all connected. We think of mental health as, just our thoughts and our emotions, but it's all connected to what's going on in our bodies as well. So
Right.
I love that you're taking this approach. It sounds like you've learned quite a lot, and I'm sure that you are going to be, I mean, you started off as a teacher, but now it sounds like in your business you're still going to be in a teacher kind of role, teaching other people about all of these things that you've been learning in your own healing journey. And I love that you're going to pass that on, and it sounds like you're going to do it in your own unique way. And I think that, yeah, we're very similar in that way, that we're, kind of decolonizing all the things that we've learned in grad school, decolonizing teaching, decolonizing therapy. And sometimes it just looks like, yeah, approaching it in a totally different way and holding space for people and talking about, things like community instead of, just being very focused on the individual. And I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, the support groups, and how helpful that was for you, because yes, I agree. I think, and that's why I do this podcast. I want women of color to feel seen, heard, and validated. And yeah, and you can feel that way in individual therapy, but also, when you take workshops, like group workshops, or you join support groups, things like that. Like it's amazing. And even sometimes being part of communities, even online, like Instagram or Facebook, like there's Facebook groups for like pretty much everything, or you follow a certain person and it's all happening in the comments section. But you feel
Yeah.
like, wow, these people get me, like, oh, they've had the same experience. And that's powerful as well, to know that you're not alone. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that we're all just talking about this a lot more, talking about health and wellness, and we're entering the healing era like this. I see it everywhere, so I love that.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think that's all super important and super powerful and needed. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
needed to just help folks just connect. I think that can be super healing. And there's a lot of things that I think keep us from connecting. And once
yeah,
we can pull those out and make those connections, that like helps,
yeah,
threefold.
yeah, it definitely does.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll wrap it up here, because otherwise we could, I'm sure, keep chatting for hours. So
Yeah.
how can people find you before we wrap this up? Where is it that people can
Yeah.
go and support your work?
The best place to find me is on Instagram. My handle is B, just the letter B, TOB again, seen. So B to be seen on Instagram. And then I have a little link tree and email list on there too, that I'll be starting up soon. So
Amazing. Yeah. Well, wishing you luck in your journey, and always here if you need anything. But yes, so I'll definitely pop the links in the description of this episode so people can easily find you and your work and connect with you. And yes, well, thank you again so much.
yeah, thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I am here to be open, honest, and vulnerable with you, because you are not alone. If you want to support this podcast, please make sure to leave a review so others can find it as well. If you're interested in working with me, you can find me at www.globalcitizentherapy.com. And if you'd like to heal your relationship with self-care and learn more about how to find the type of soul care that works for you, you can find the link to my workshop in the description of this podcast episode. Thank you again, and see you next time.